Welcome to Protein for Critical Periods, a podcast exploring the role of nutrition during the most demanding stages of poultry and swine production. In this series, we discuss how feeding strategies, gut health, and protein quality can help animals thrive during critical developmental and transition periods. Protein for Critical Periods is presented by Hamlet Protein. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Hamlet podcast, where we are introducing Marisabel Caballero. And maybe, Marisabel, you could introduce yourself a little bit and what you're working with, what kind of field you're working in.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anders, for giving me the word. As you know, I'm Marisabel Caballero. Funny thing, we are doing this in English, but my mother tongue is Spanish. And I'm very happy to be here today. So I'm working with Hamlet Protein as category manager. And I carry with myself more than 20 years of experience in the animal production industry.
Very good. And we have been colleagues for quite some time now. And you know, I'm a specialist in pigs and you are more on poultry. So we will try to see if in this session we can elaborate on what we are good at in Hamlet and what your specialties are and the knowledge you bring.
Also happy to hear that because I think there is a lot of room for good quality proteins in poultry production, and we are not studying that very deeply so far.
Oh, but once again, welcome. And is it correctly understood that you actually live in Germany? Is that correct?
I do. I'm living in Germany since 2012. And I'm very happily established in Visbeck. What about you, Anders?
Yeah, I'm probably the Danish audience. They will know me by now, but I live in Odense, you know, in the central part of Denmark, and I've been in Hamlet for the last 15 years now. So I know a lot about the Danish industry in relation to farming, both mainly piglets, but also a little bit in poultry. And people will probably know me from other episodes of Grisen, which is a famous podcast in Denmark, with a lot of listeners. So that is why we are trying to do this, to see whether we can extend this to a more international audience. So that's also why we have been so lucky that this production company actually will help us do this.
Absolutely. Even I know you from other episodes that were shown with subtitles. So that's very good.
That's good. But maybe we should start up. I'm a little curious. You are from South America originally, correct?
I am from Honduras.
Yeah, and how do you end up in Germany?
Well, I got married, and then we came to live in Germany. So my husband is also a little bit German.
Would you explain a little bit what is your career path? Where did you work before you came to Hamlet?
Well, I was working in the feed additives industry. I worked for EW Nutrition for 11.75 years. So that's, 11 years, 9 months, before I decided to make a career change because I wanted to do more nutrition. And Hamlet happens to fit perfectly into that.
That sounds like the perfect choice for you then.
Actually, yes. I'm very happy and I'm very excited to have a new compañeros.
Yeah. And maybe you should explain why do we use the term compañeros in Hamlet?
Well, this is very nice because first the term compañeros is in Spanish. So it's in my native language, and it means to be colleagues, but at the same time, a little bit more than colleagues. It means to support each other, no matter what.
That's very good. And as you, of course, know, our CEO used to work in Latin America for many, many years. So that is maybe also a reason why we use the term compañeros.
Exactly. And a funny thing, he used to work in Honduras. So I in my city. So this was a very nice casualty when we met, and we talked about it extensively.
Well, Marisabel, we better get started. We have 2 episodes coming up. One about poultry. The other one is about piglets.
Exactly.
And you know, my favorite is piglets, and your favorite is broilers and poultry. So that is actually perfect.
It is so.
Let's get started. Marisabel, what are we going to talk about today in relation to broilers?
Well, we are going to talk about critical periods in broiler production, and we are also going to talk about the best protein for these critical periods, because nutrition cannot be the same 4 critical periods as 4 periods in which the physiological demands are lower.
I'm just wondering, in relation to broiler production and poultry, what defines a critical period?
Well, critical periods are periods in which the animal has very high physiological demands. And they can be because of nature, like the starter period. And they can also be because of environment. So when we have a lot of environment pressure, like, for example, in the summer when we have heat stress. So the animal has very high physiological demands that, if not fulfilled, can affect, for example, in the starter periods, its development, including the development of the gastrointestinal tract and the development of the immune system, which are crucial for the future life of the animal. Or in cases of external stress, it can compromise the health of the animals as well.
Okay. So you're working globally in many different countries. So these, let's say, critical periods, do they vary from region to region? And are there different issues to take into account whether you work in Latin America or in Europe or in Asia, for instance?
Well, there are some critical periods that are universal. For instance, the starter period. The broilers are just hatched. They have some management in the hatchery, like, for example, vaccination, sexing sometimes, and so on. But when they arrive to the farm, well, they find themselves with a new environment, with solid feed. They are used to, well, egg yolk, in this case, for their nutrition. And they do need to eat and drink as fast as possible in order to initiate their development. But it happens that the digestive system of the broiler is not developed yet, it's not fully developed, and the enzymatic system is also not developed. So the enzyme production in broilers in the first days of life is very small, especially when we talk about proteolytic enzymes. So this is why protein nutrition is so critical for broilers in the starter phase.
Yeah, because I think I learned that a lot of starter feed actually contains high inclusion of soybean meal, and no specialty products are used in any way. But there should be some benefits about using Hamlet in the starter phase, because normally you have 5 different phases when you have broiler production. Is that correct? Could you tell a little bit about how you do that?
That depends on where you are and how long you are going to keep the broilers in the farm. So, for example, it's very common to have 3 or 4 feeding phases only, because the production is so quick that the starter phase takes maybe the first 7 to 14 days. That depends on the operation, normally 10. Then we have a grower phase until day 21st. And from then on, there can be 1 or 2 more feeding phases, but depending on the number of days that the animal is going to be held in the farm. So broilers, for example, can be taken out as soon as 30 days in countries in Asia, for example, or after 50 days in the US, for example, when we have this market for pieces. But you ask me, are there other critical periods that are different in different countries? Well, there are. In Asia, for example, especially in the Philippines, they have something that is called the 4-quarter syndrome. And this is a period in which environmental pressure is very high. So there is heat stress, there is rains, and there is a higher contamination of mycotoxins because of grain storage. So in this period, well, they consider it very critical. And we have also placed a Hamlet Protein in broilers during this period in that country, for instance. Other countries, for example, in the US, they have a lot of non-antibiotic ever production. And this is also critical because if they are not using quite often antibiotics or anticoccidials, which are also considered antibiotics. So in that case, another critical period is around the 3rd week, in which the coccidia pressure is higher. And then they extend the use of very good quality proteins in order to make it easier for the broiler to cope with external stressors.
So, excuse me for saying this, but a good start makes all the difference. Is that the conclusion?
Well, a good start definitely makes a lot of difference. And in the concrete case of broilers, we know that when the enzyme activity is not developed, then we need to provide proteins that are easily digestible. And we have proven it with our Hamlet Protein product.
I'm curious, what did the industry do before we knew this phenomenon that, we need to do something special in the early phase of the broiler?
Well, the industry has always done something special for the early phase.
What, for instance?
For instance, try to choose highly digestible raw materials for this phase. Mm-hmm. Quite often, animal proteins, for instance. But
like fish meal or?
Fish meal can be one, but other, for example, high-quality vegetable proteins or not so high quality, but very rich in protein and amino acids. For instance, it's common to use potato proteins, it's common to use corn gluten meal or other vegetable proteins as well.
Okay. So could you please define what is a good product here? Because you mentioned potato protein, fish meal, and so on. But what makes Hamlet Protein special here?
Well, thing is that there are many studies with different protein sources. In Hamlet Protein, we have studied what is the speed of digestion and absorption of protein. And it happens that Hamlet Protein products are ones of the best there because of the enzymatic treatment of the soybean meal that Hamlet Protein is doing. So that leaves this raw material with a higher quantity of small peptides, which are immediately available for the broilers.
And I guess also in broilers, the gut system is very small and things has to happen really fast compared to other species. Is that correct?
Well, it is really small and grows very quickly.
Yeah.
So yes, the protein needs in the starter phase are very high, but the protein absorption is not.
No, but when you talk absorption, I think we are talking kinetics here, correct?
Well, yes, we are talking part of the protein kinetics process. That's true.
And please, maybe a lot of the listeners, they don't know anything about kinetics, so maybe you should explain. What do we understand by kinetics and speed of absorption?
Okay, and what Hamlet has been extensively researched in the last years is how is the protein digestion kinetics inside the animals. So it comprises from the digestion, what is the speed of digestion, how quickly and available is the protein for the enzymes that are digesting it, and afterwards, how quick and how efficient is the absorption of these digested proteins. But when we are talking about digestion, it is not only one enzyme that is targeting proteins. We have different enzymes and they enter in a sequence. So that means that from complex proteins, we will get large peptides. From large peptides, we will get small peptides. And from the small peptides, we will get amino acids. So the process is quite complex and can be quite long. But what matters is not only how the enzymes are digesting this protein and breaking it down, but also where they are doing it and how quickly they can be available for absorption. And in the absorption process, it's also not easy. It's not that something is passing from the lumen of the intestine and immediately going into the bloodstream. No, we have transporters that take the small molecules. In the case of the broiler, in the first days, they can even absorb small peptides. And this is an advantage when you have products like a Hamlet Protein, because with a higher quantity of small peptides, we have raw materials to build tissues immediately available for the broilers.
And I think we also used to claim that we actually pre-digest our products in our process.
Exactly.
And that's,
yes.
that my conclusion could be that that's even more important in animals where the transition time is so short that if they really want to utilize this protein, it needs to be pre-digested somehow. And that's actually what we do in Hamlet. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct. It's better if we have these pre-digested raw materials, because the transporters are there to take them from the lumen into the enterocytes, and others will take them from the enterocytes into the bloodstream. But the quicker this process is, the more available that these building blocks are for the animal to, well, first to build the gastrointestinal tract, to develop the gastrointestinal tract, and to develop the immune system, which are the two critical systems that need to develop in the first 10 days of life of the broilers.
In order to make a successful feeding for broilers, you say this is very important, but this is important in relation to daily gain, feed conversion, feed pad lesions. Why is this important, and what's in it for the customer? How can they actually see the difference?
Gut development is the fundament for a healthy growth and also for a good performance. Yeah. So if this is important for gut development, then it is important for the long-term health of the broilers. And we have seen it having a better gut barrier function even at 42 days. And 42 days is 32 days after the feeding period of Hamlet Protein. So it does have a carryover effect.
So a good start makes all the difference. And even with a carryover effect, could you explain more about the carryover effect?
Gladly. When we are talking a carryover effect, we are talking an effect that is lasting more than the feeding period. And you get that when you help with the development, for example, in our case of the gastrointestinal tract, and when we help with the development of the immune system. So we get healthier and more efficient broilers in the long term. We have seen it. So, for instance, for every gram of a body weight increase after the feeding period, we are getting 4 to even 8 grams in our best trial of body weight at the end of the life cycle of the broiler. So that means that, for example, I'm given real life examples. It is quite often that we get 10 to 15 grams after the feeding period. That means after the 10 days of the starter phase. And that at the end of the cycle, we can have an increase of 50 to 130 grams in our best trial.
Oh, that's a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah.
So you truly believe that we actually do very good here compared to other products that could be, let's say, compared to Hamlet in this case because of our pre-digestion, so to speak?
Well, for me, seeing is believing. Yeah. I do not only believe, I have seen it.
Yeah.
And we have different trials in which we are comparing a Hamlet Protein not only with a substitution of soybean meal, but with a substitution of other high-value proteins. For instance, fish meal, other soy products.
Yeah. And I think that the secret is actually the pre-digestion, as we talked about earlier.
Well, yes, the secret is, well, there is no secret, but you are totally right. The secret is the pre-digestion. And to have a highly available protein source, but not only that, we also have a protein source that is clean.
Yeah.
So having a lower anti-nutritional factors really helps. For instance, alpha-galactoligosaccharides that can cause gut disturbances and promote the growth of pathogenic bacteria. Then there is one issue less. And in the starter period, this is very critical. Even beta-conglycinin. Of course, we need large quantities of beta-conglycinin in order to cause allergic reactions in broilers. But we have seen that lower quantities can start to produce inflammation. And inflammation is spending resources. And not only that, but possibly also hindering the development of the gastrointestinal tract.
And the good thing is that Hamlet is actually very cost-effective.
Well, it is. We have proven that not only in scientific trials, which we have a very good database, but also in commercial farms, we are actually using a Hamlet Protein for a long term. It is very rewarding to know that there are producers that have even extended the period in which they use Hamlet Protein, especially during critical periods. For instance, this is quarter syndrome that I mentioned before, or for their non-antibiotic ever production to even 21 days, because they do see a return.
So what is your recommendation to nutritionists to use Hamlet Protein in the diets for poultry?
Well, this is a very good question. in our experience and also in many of our experiments, we have seen that there can be a dose-response effect.
Mm-hmm.
The minimum inclusion that we recommend to have a visible effect is 5% of the diet. However, we have seen better results even when we have 7.5%. But this also depends on the quantity of days that the starter period goes for, because the animals do not understand percentages. They understand the grams that they are actually eating. So we have seen, for example, if the starter period goes for 14 days, we see very good effects with the dosage I mentioned, 5%. But if the starter period goes for less than 10 days, then we do recommend to increase it in order to have even more protein during the small window of inclusion available for the gut development.
So I can understand that it's very much on individual basis, which leads me to the question, because time flies and we need to stop within a few minutes. So, but I would like to know, how do you work with your customers or clients, or what do we call them? How do you work with them? Do you go to visit them, or do you guide them, or could you explain how you work on a daily basis?
All of what you mentioned before. So our aim is to effectively communicate how to use Hamlet Protein products. So we are talking about, for example, customer visits on a face-to-face or even via Teams or via online resources. But at the same time, to get to more persons, we do things like this podcast, for instance, write articles or have different types of communications. In those communications, you will see that the standard recommendation, so to say, is to have a 5% inclusion. Why is that? Because most commonly, the starter period goes for 10 days.
Okay. I would like to hear just a few lines about laying hens, because we have done some small study on laying hens as well, and it seems very promising.
It is. And actually, when we talk about laying hens, we are talking about two standard critical periods here. So the first one is the one mentioned before, the starter period, because in pullets, it is as critical as in broilers. And in pullets, in the first 5 weeks, we need a very rapid development of the gastrointestinal tract and also of the musculoskeletal system. The other standard critical period that we have identified in laying hens is the pre-laying period and the onset of laying, including the pre-peak.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because during this period, we have a higher physiological demand. We have higher stressors from the environment. It is quite usual that the pullets are transferred from one house to another. At the same time, the light period is increasing in order to stimulate the sexual development for stimulating to the lay.
In summary, what is your key points from using Hamlet in broiler feed?
Well, my key points is first to recognize the critical periods that we have during the broiler life cycle, to recognize the critical periods that are inherent to each region and even each production unit. And from that point, changing the nutrition during these critical periods in order to include more raw materials of easy absorption so the animal gets the support that it needs.
And the inclusion of Hamlet should be?
And the inclusion of Hamlet
in the
should
perfect
be,
world?
Well, in the perfect world, we will have a 5% inclusion during the starter phase. If there is a higher quantity of stressors and the inclusion needs to be extended, then we can recommend to go for the grower phase with half of the inclusion that you had during the starter.
Thank you very much. If customers or people of interest would like to get in contact with you, is that possible? And how do they do it the best way?
Of course, it is possible. So you can check Hamlet Protein website. And in Hamlet Protein website, there is a nice picture of me with my contact details.
Marisabel, thank you for being here and explaining about all our products in broiler feed. And I also hope that the listeners has got a lot out of it. And I hope you will contact Marisabel if you have any further questions. So once again, Marisabel, thank you for now.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Protein for Critical Periods. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights into nutrition, gut health, and animal performance during critical production stages. Protein for critical periods was presented by Hamlet Protein. For more information, visit hamletprotein.com. Thanks for listening.